Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, January the 7th, 2025. So Mars has gone back into Cancer. It was in Leo, it's now moved into Cancer, and that actually happened yesterday. But in this video, I want to consider what it means for Mars to be in Cancer. How we should perhaps see it in a birth chart, and also I want to look at a few famous people who have Mars in Cancer. It's a biased sample. It's biased in terms of people I might be interested in, but maybe by looking at some famous people we might get some idea about what it does mean to have this placement. Also, I notice things are going on with Justin Trudeau. Sort of over the last year and perhaps more, I've talked about Justin Trudeau. People seem to have been very interested in Justin Trudeau. Yeah, and it does seem that it's all coming to an end. He hasn't resigned quite yet, at least at the time of recording this video. He hasn't resigned. Maybe by the time you watch this video, he will have gone. But I've heard it said that it might be a couple of days before he goes. I do want to, I suppose, very quickly look at what's happening in his chart with particular reference to his solar return, because we have to remember that Justin Trudeau was born on Christmas Day. And so that solar return for Christmas Day of last year, which was only a couple of weeks ago, may have some relevance, have some impact on him in terms of his decision to step down. I mean, we don't know whether he stepped down for sure, but at the moment it seems very certain that this is, well, fairly, I mean, not certain, but it seemed very likely that he is on the verge of stepping down. But before I look at Mars in Cancer and Justin Trudeau, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, January the 7th, 2025. So here is the position of the positions of the planets for today, and you can see, of course, that Mars is firmly in Cancer. There it is. Mars is at 29:31 Cancer, I suppose firmly in Cancer. Doesn't look very firmly in Cancer, but Mars is going quite slowly. So wherever you are, Mars today is in Cancer, and I suppose a lot of us may be getting used to the fact that Mars is in this sign. I mean, it moved out of Cancer, I think, at the beginning of November, and now it's firmly back. And Mars is about the way we assert ourselves, and with Mars in Cancer, it's quite an emotional placement, so there may be sort of more emphasis on emotion now that Mars is in Cancer. Now, one thing when I did talk about Mars in Cancer yesterday that I didn't really emphasize is the fact that Mars is in mutual reception with the Moon. So Mars is in Cancer, which is a sign of the Moon, and Moon is in Aries, which is the sign of Mars. So they've got this mutual reception relationship. So although Mars in Cancer is in its fall, Mars is fallen in Cancer, it does gain dignity by the fact that it's in mutual reception with the Moon. And also Mars, of course, in a water sign has triplicity, so it's not quite as bad as it looks, Mars in Cancer. But with Mars in Cancer, I suppose I'll be talking about it a bit later, but it is what we put our energy into, and we might be putting our energy into things that are important to us. It can be the country, maybe. It can be about patriotism, Mars in Cancer, and in general, things we believe in and things we want to hold firmly onto, but also perhaps things that we might at some level feel are somewhat threatened. Now, the Moon still in Libra for most of the day. Now, London time, the Moon does move into Taurus at, when does it move into Taurus? It moves London time 11 minutes past 10 in the evening. So if you're in Europe, Africa, right at the end of the day, it's possible that the moon is in Taurus, but it's only for a couple of hours. Or even, if you're in Paris or Berlin, the moon will move into Taurus at 11 minutes past 11 in the evening. So you're only going to have 49 minutes of the moon in Taurus. So I think outside of the Americas, we can regard it as being a moon in Aries day, which isn't so bad, because the moon in Aries is in mutual reception with Mars. So I don't think moon in Aries is weak, and I think it's something that can be something of a bonus, though the moon in Aries does make a square to Mars. Remember that. That moon square Mars is a little bit tense, but again, they are in mutual reception with each other, but there is scope there for getting angry at times. Now, if you are in the Americas, then at some stage in the day, moon will move into Taurus. So that would happen at 11 minutes past 5 in the afternoon if you're in New York, which would be 11 minutes past 2 in the afternoon if you're in California or British Columbia or Oregon or Washington State. I suppose even earlier if you're in Hawaii or Alaska. So in the Americas, the last part of the day, you do experience a change with the moon moving into Taurus. And moon moving into Taurus, I mean, in one sense, it's a good thing. I mean, the moon is exalted in Taurus, so that might create some extra stability, a feeling that we can touch our environment, that we have some place in it all. And of course, the moon will be in Taurus at the same time as the sun is in Capricorn. So sun and moon in earth signs. So that may perhaps allow us to bring things down to earth. Though, should be said, that when the moon moves into Taurus, it simultaneously makes a square to Pluto. So some of us might be quite concerned about what we have and what we don't have, and we might really want to hold on to what we have, especially as Mars is also in Cancer. So those are the main aspects going on today, except for moon trine Mercury. So Mercury is at 28 Sagittarius, so Mercury is getting ready to move into Capricorn, but it's not quite there yet. So moon in late Aries would make a trine to Mercury. So that moon trine Mercury will, I suppose, facilitate communication. It's a good aspect, I think, because Moon and Mercury are two planets which are about communication, and there will be a free flow of communication. It'll be quite easy to say what's on our mind, and I don't think once we start talking that much will hold us back. So I suppose with Moon trine Mercury, talking might be easy, but maybe it would just be a little bit too easy, as the words could just flow and flow. Now this chart Tuesday is set for New York, so if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, the moon is earlier in the sign. So at noon in Sydney, which is representative of Australasia, we see the moon at 17 Aries rather than 26 Aries. And so moon is actually in the middle of Aries, so don't have to worry about the moon moving into Taurus. And it's very much a moon which is first quarter. You can see sun square moon, and so if you're in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, there may be a certain sense that you now understand the lunar cycle, you know what's going on, and you know what the main theme is since the new moon on December the 30th and 31st, and you might feel that, now is the time you have to do something about it. So Sun in the Capricorn, if you like, is the base, and you've moved on. The moon has moved on from its base at new moon in Capricorn, and now the moon is in Aries square the Sun, and it's actually time to take action. What are you going to do? How are you going to take advantage of the opportunities and challenges of 2025? So that might be more of a theme in Australia or New Zealand, but I think all of us have to be aware of the fact that it is still a first quarter moon, regardless of where we are, and it is a time to really get to grips with 2025. I know 2025 has only been going on for a week, but it's time to just face reality. As far as the heliocentric position is concerned, remember the heliocentric position is, when you put the Sun at the centre of the solar system, where it should be. I don't think there's anything particularly dramatic going on heliocentrically, but we do see, what do we see? We see Venus trine Pluto. We sort of had Venus trine Pluto yesterday, but I think that Venus trine Pluto is still there, and heliocentric Venus trine Pluto can be about influence and wanting to influence, wanting to stay in control, perhaps, of certain people, and I suppose to an extent the power dynamics of various relationships could be important. And Venus is not just aspected by Pluto, but it's also aspected by the Earth. So you've got Earth 45 degrees from Venus, and so with Earth semi-square Venus, I suppose the Earth is where we are, and if it's semi-square Venus, there may be a bit of a challenge about how we relate. We want to relate to everything around us. We want to be part of humanity, part of the flow of humanity, and perhaps with Earth semi-square Venus, we just might feel that we're not quite there. We may feel a certain sense of estrangement there, but still there is this need to relate, this need to feel that we are part of something. And now Chiron is exactly square Mars. We've got Mars square Chiron. I mean, this aspect has been building up, and now it's exact. So heliocentric Mars square Chiron. Yeah, Mars is about how we assert ourselves, and Chiron is the principle maybe of wanting to do things differently, because we have to do things differently. Because if we do things in the way we used to do them, perhaps in the way we used to do them in 2024, are we going to be of any use to anyone? Are we going to be able to heal the world's wounds? Maybe not. And so we do want to stand out, or some of us might want to stand out with Mars square Chiron. And, that is the nature of Chiron. Chiron is the maverick. Charles Cowell, who discovered Chiron, he referred to its orbit as being a maverick. So in fact, the first person who described Chiron as a maverick was its discoverer. I don't think he wasn't an astrologer, although I think he was in written contact with astrologers. I think I can't remember the name, but there was an astrologer who wrote to Charles Cowell, I think, asking about what time Chiron was discovered, and I think by all accounts he was very forthcoming in giving the information. So yeah, Mars square Chiron. I think we do want to stand out, but the reason we want to stand out, hopefully, is because we want to have maximum impact in terms of making the world a better place, and perhaps healing the world's wounds. And of course, the Earth is getting closer and closer to that conjunction of Mars, but that does create the potential for aggravation. We can feel it. We can feel perhaps the temperature rising, but that Earth-Mars conjunction is still quite a way away. So now I want to look at the astrology from a perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, January the 7th, 2025. Aries. Aries, you are really feeling that you want to make things happen. I think you're, to an extent, somewhat used to the fact that Mars is in Cancer. It is a change, and with Mars in Cancer, you certainly have a greater understanding of your boundaries, and you are perhaps quite protective now with Mars moving into the sign of the Crab, and the crab, this animal which is defended. It's got its thick armor, and so you're getting a little bit used to it, and you also realize that you perhaps can't assert yourself in quite the way you used to assert yourself, but still you want to make things happen. And the moon, that is because the moon is in your sign. The moon is in, the last degrees of your sign, middle of your sign if you're in Australia and New Zealand, but it's starting to move towards the end of it by and large. And the moon and Mars are in mutual reception. So when I talked about what was happening to you yesterday, I kind of forgot to mention this, and I think that was quite a serious omission, because that moon Mars mutual reception does give you a lot of strength. Even though Mars might seem to be retrograde and weakened in Cancer, particularly as you're just getting used to Cancer, and Mars is at very late degrees Cancer, even though Mars appears to be weakened in Cancer, it's in mutual reception to the moon, and that does make all the difference. So it means, that for most of the day, perhaps all of the day, you're able to hold your ground, and you are able to really stand up for what is important. And if there's something you need to defend, then now would be a great time to do it. It's perhaps about something which you regard as being important to your security or your well-being, or perhaps it's someone else's security you're concerned about, but you are able to be a defender. And sometimes you have to take the initiative to preserve the status quo. I mean, the status quo perhaps has a bad reputation, keeping things as they used to be. And sometimes the status quo, though, does matter. We don't want to have everything to be turned upside down, change for the sake of change. And so you might have to take action to make sure that things don't disintegrate. You know, of course, that there are new challenges in 2025. Of course, you can't do things in the same old way, but there are certain things from the past which are worth preserving, and so that might be part of your role. That you can see disintegration, but you just think that some things are worth keeping and some things you have to stand up for. So if you are going to assert yourself, do it properly. You don't have to assume a fight. With Mars in Cancer, don't be in so much of a hurry. Do take your time, but I suppose don't take too much time. But if you hold to what you believe in, and you think things through, and you don't always, of course, feel that any initiative you have to take has to be direct. Remember, Mars is in Cancer. Crab rules of Cancer. Crab, crab is an animal that likes to walk sideways, so sometimes sideways movement is the best way of getting results, rather than a frontal attack. Not that really you should be attacking anyone. And I think that part of the reason you feel that things need to be preserved is because it's going to be tough to keep things on an even keel. I mean, you can see the way things are going. It's becoming increasingly clear to you that in order to keep things as they were. It's going to require a lot of energy, and you can see, I suppose, maybe the storm clouds on the horizon, or the winds of change. They're there, and you know it's going to happen, and maybe it's about just accepting the inevitability of change, but you don't want everything to be swept away. And so perhaps that's a lot to do with what is happening at the moment. And you shouldn't forget also that the North Node is still in Aries. North Node is, now in the first degree of Aries. So really, a North Node in the first degree of Aries is really very strong as it moves to that Aries point. And so even though Mars has gone into Cancer, even though Mars is retrograde, that's another reminder that you need to be assertive. It is the right thing to do, and there are some things, Aries, which you really need to stand up for. Now, on a more sort of day-to-day sort of basis, we do have a square between the Moon and Mars today, and that square between Moon and Mars takes place. Well, I mean, it depends where you are, but if you're in the Americas, I would have said that Moon Mars square is probably going to be strongest this afternoon. If you're in Europe, then it's going to be more about this evening. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, that's going to be something to worry about tomorrow. But with this Moon square Mars, and with Moon Mars in mutual reception to each other, that it is perhaps the time for action. And there may be something that really does annoy you, and it may be a person's behaviour that annoys you. You may feel that something has to be said, but there's a right way of doing it because the Moon and Mars are in mutual reception. So, if something has to be said, if something has to be done, I do think you can do it. Of course, there's a right way and a wrong way, and as I've already said, a direct approach is not the best approach. A kind of sideways approach might be the best way of getting the kind of results you are looking for. Taurus, the Moon is in a somewhat transitional stage. The Moon is in sort of late Aries, but getting ready to move into Taurus. If you're in the Americas, I think your experience of the day may be different than if, for example, you're in Australasia, because in the Americas, Moon actually moves into Taurus this afternoon. If you're in Australia, New Zealand, then Moon does not move into Taurus until tomorrow. Even in Europe, it doesn't move into Taurus until quite late in the day, very late in the day, actually. So if you are an American Taurus, you may experience a change over the course of the day as the Moon moves into your sign. I think that you will become more dynamic, and you'll feel that you're ready to make things happen. But in other parts of the world, you may feel that it's not quite the time to reveal your hand. And whether or not you're taking action or preparing to take action, there could be a certain amount of tension at the moment. Just a feeling that something is building up, but something kind of has to give. And I suppose you're very aware of everything that's holding you back, but also you're very aware of the need for change. And so, that could be quite frustrating, just feeling that something needs to happen and you can't make it happen. And so over the course of the day, Taurus, it's probably a good idea to find ways to relax, and just to bear in mind that you can't do everything. You can't be at the center of everything, and sometimes you have to perhaps accept that now's not the right time, or maybe wait for other people to get themselves together. So don't feel unduly pressurized, though when the moon does move into Taurus, so that will be this afternoon if you're in the Americas. It will be late in the evening if you're in Europe. When the moon moves into Taurus, it does make a square to Pluto. And I think that moon square Pluto could be important, at least in terms of your psychology and your feeling of, I don't know, feeling of action, a feeling that you need to take action. It's not necessarily the action itself, it's the feeling that you need to make something happen. And so with moon square Pluto, it might just feel that it won't wait, that you really want to get something off the ground. And so if you're a European Taurus, you might be winding down this evening, and suddenly something might occur to you, and it might keep occurring to you, and you might feel you have to take action straight away, or at least think something through. I mean, I know that, say, at 11 o'clock at night or quarter to midnight, it might not be the right time, but European Taurians can maybe benefit from late night work, very late night work. Something you do just before midnight could actually be really useful and really may allow you to focus on something. Now, if you're in the Americas, that's more about this afternoon. And so this afternoon in the Americas, just focus on what's important to you and try to develop a single focus. Don't get distracted with Moon in Taurus square Pluto. Just decide what's important, and if you can, just give it everything you've got, because I think that you, at the very least, will be making a very good start. So, in a way, it's a somewhat complicated day because things are changing, and it's difficult to be entirely relaxed because you know that something out there does need to be attended to, and at the same time you are thinking about things in your own way. You have a very sort of individual way of looking at things, particularly at the beginning of the day, and you sort of look at things deeply and you feel things deeply, and this may inform your later actions. So don't take things at face value. Ask yourself questions, and I think in the end you're really going to be able to sort of get to the bottom of things, and once you understand, then that will be the call for action, I suppose. Gemini, the moon is making a trine to Mercury, and it is, I suppose, in some respects, the main aspect of the day. I mean, it might be moon square Mars, but that moon square Mars, certainly if you're in Europe, is pretty late in the day. I mean, London time, moon square Mars is 9. What is it? 9. It's after 9 o'clock in the evening. But that moon trine Mercury is perhaps what you should be focusing on, not least because it's a fortunate aspect, and it does involve Mercury, which is your ruler. So with that moon trine Mercury, I think that does make you fairly extroverted, more extroverted than usual, and you're pretty sociable. I think you will enjoy other people's company, and so try not to isolate you. Try to find out what other people are doing, and see if they've got something interesting to tell you. Perhaps they've got something interesting to offer. And it can be about just conversation for the sake of conversation. I mean I'm speaking as a Gemini, but I don't regard myself as a trivial person, but there's always a role for triviality in the lives of a Gemini. And so perhaps with that moon trine Mercury, it's just a good time to be talking about nothing in particular. Just conversation in itself is a way of getting to know people, and nothing substantial has to be said. I mean, I suppose it needn't degenerate into small talk. Small talk isn't something I know much about or anything about, but moon trine Mercury is a supremely communicative aspect, and it does have an impact on you, and it does allow you to perhaps be more forthcoming than you usually are. But while you are expressing yourself, you can express a certain authority. So don't take yourself lightly. Remember, people that take themselves lightly don't come to much. I always say that to myself. It's tough, that. I mean, I suppose being a Gemini, you can take things lightly because, I mean, I think one of the reasons Geminis can take things lightly is because they might come to the conclusion that in the end we're all going to die anyway, so what is the point? So is there any point in taking anything seriously? So, we can take things lightly, and it's not the right approach, actually. There are some things we do have to take seriously, and it is a day for having a serious side to yourself and actually recognizing that in certain areas you are an authority. You actually know more than other people, and you can demonstrate authority and perhaps vision as well. So if you take yourself seriously, Gemini, and you take your pronouncements seriously, and you don't just say the first thing that comes to mind. I know that I've just said it might be a good day for small talk, perhaps, but do realize when the moments come for you to be serious, when you can speak with authority and knowledge, you might not take yourself seriously to begin with, but you must take yourself seriously because you have got something to say and you've got something to offer. And it may be a situation where your vision is the right vision, and it is absolutely appropriate to express that vision, and also to give people a sense of what is right and what is wrong. And I suppose you could say, well, that's showing a bit of prejudice, but sometimes there's a role for prejudice, and you say, no, you should be doing this and you should not be doing this. And yeah, Gemini, be very clear that you know what you're talking about when the moment arrives. And it's possible today that actually you can give some really very good advice. Now, the moon does move into Taurus at some stage today. Well, okay, not if you're in Australia or New Zealand. That moon moves into Taurus tomorrow, but late in the day, very late in the day in Europe, moon moves into Taurus. This afternoon it moves into Taurus in the Americas. So, when the moon moves into Taurus, moves out of Aries into Taurus, it just may be a time when you feel that you have to slow down a bit, that perhaps you've said your bit. And so that, I think that's especially the case if you're in the Americas, because that last part of the day from the afternoon onwards, you're possibly not quite as fluent and communicative as you had been earlier in the day. So if you're an American Taurian and you've got something to say, then probably best to get it out of the way by this afternoon. If you leave it too late, you might have missed your moment. If you're in Europe, that's not something you have to worry about. You've almost got until midnight, not quite until midnight, but there is that chance. So American Geminis, there may be a certain amount of hurry in terms of getting your message across. And so I think overall, it looks to me like being a fairly constructive day, and I think you've got lots to say, and I think you've got also lots to offer. And it's just very important that you don't trivialize yourself too much. I mean, yes, if you're just having idle conversation, just it's a way to get to know people, yeah, sure, you can afford to be a little bit trivial, but don't take it too far. There is a moment where you do have to be serious and recognize that in some ways you are an authority. Cancer, for most of the day, perhaps all of the day, the moon is moving through Aries, and the moon in Aries is in mutual reception to Mars. So moon is in the sign of Mars, Mars is in the sign of Cancer. Now, when I talked about your sign yesterday, I kind of forgot to say that the moon and Mars are in mutual reception, and I think that was something I really should have said at the time, because that Moon-Mars mutual reception does make all the difference. The moon is strongly placed, and Mars gives you, I think, real strength, and especially as Mars is back in your sign. So you've got Mars moving through your sign, moving backwards through your sign, but it's definitely there in mutual reception to the moon, and so that really does allow you to be assertive and to stand up for yourself. And so there's no reason, Cancer, why, for example, other people should get the better of you, because you know best, and I think, yeah, you do know how to assert yourself. Now, there is a moon square Mars coming up. Well, the moon does square Mars today, and moon square Mars can be a difficult aspect, because moon square Mars is about anger and getting angry about things, and perhaps holding on to things that you believe in tightly. And if anyone contradicts you or tries to argue that what you really believe in is not right, or you've got something wrong, you're going to react. And that might sound like a bad thing, but I think that this moon square Mars does work into your favour, not least because the moon and Mars are in mutual reception. And so it is a time, Cancer, to be assertive. Don't underestimate yourself. Maybe you feel, I don't know, that you haven't got the strength, that it's not the right time, that you've got other preoccupations. But no, if you want to be dynamic, now is the time to be dynamic. If there's something you want to make happen, give it your best today, because I do think that you're in a very strong position, and don't leave it too late, especially if you're in the Americas, because if you're in the Americas, then this afternoon the moon moves out of Aries and into Taurus. Now, there's nothing wrong with the moon moving into Taurus. The moon actually is exalted in Taurus, but while it's in Aries, the moon is in mutual reception to Mars, and of course Mars is moving through your sign now, moving backwards through your sign. So in the Americas, during that first part of the day, you really are able to have an impact, and so it would be a shame if you wasted it. I mean, if you do miss a moment, I mean, it's not the end of the world. I mean, the moon does move into Taurus this afternoon in the Americas, very late this evening in Europe. So in Europe, you've got more time to take advantage of the Moon-Mars square. So, I mean, I don't know if you're in Europe, you might feel a bit of a change right at the end of the day as the moon moves into Taurus. I think moon moving into Taurus is slower, and so things might slow down. Certainly if you're in the Americas by this evening, I would guess you're slowing down, even though the moon does make a square to Pluto. I mean, moon square Pluto, yeah, it is powerful, but I'm not convinced that you have to take note of it. I mean, it depends what you're doing. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that moon how relevant that moon square Pluto is. So yes, if you're an American Cancerian, then I do think that this evening you can start to slow down, and I think that there is going to be less pressure on you. Also, it's not just about the moon square Mars. We've also got moon trine Mercury, and you've got moon trine Mercury for most of the day, all of the day if you're in Australia, well, probably all of the day if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But with moon trine Mercury, Cancer, it's a great time for telling people what's on your mind, and by and large the words are going to flow, and at the same time you will have an intuitive control over what you say. You're not going to have to be very self-conscious about it, but it's more, you'll just have a feeling, not a feeling, an intuition about what is the right thing to say at a particular time. And timing actually might be very important. By saying the right words at the right time, you can change everything. And you'll just know the time is right, and you'll know the words are right. And I think you can then actually have quite a powerful impact in terms of changing your environment and making your environment more conducive to you and the kind of world you want to live in. So, Cancer, if you're not happy with any aspect of the world, I'm talking in particular about your part of the world, the part of the world that you have to operate in. If you're not happy about it, and I might be talking about the way a room is organized, or the way a space is organized, whether it's at home or at work or somewhere else. If you're not happy with it, you can say something about it, and that can lead to a change, and that change will, I think, be quite fortunate, and you'll feel more comfortable. So, don't hold back with that moon trine Mercury, because through the power of your words, through the easy power of your words, which are well-timed words, you can actually create changes which in the end are going to make you feel more comfortable. Leo, it's a day when I think that the concept of freedom continues to be important. When you don't want to be constrained, I think that is really important. If you're being held back by people, by situations, by whatever, you're not going to be happy about it. And there's absolutely no reason to be held back. I think, Leo, it's a day when it's just very important that you value your freedom. I mean, your freedom really does matter. And it's a time, Leo, when you can do pretty much, within reason, whatever you want. And in particular, if something has recently been holding you back, then now really is a time when you can liberate yourself from it. And you'll be helped by the fact that the moon is in Aries. Okay, the moon could change sign this afternoon if you're in the Americas, but still, for most of the day in the Americas, the moon will be in Aries. For everyone else, it's pretty much going to be in Aries all day. So with the moon in Aries, Leo, you do have a chance to, not just free yourself, but actually understand everything that is possible, because there are possibilities that maybe recently you have missed out on. You perhaps didn't think it was possible, but now you're starting to realize that actually it can happen. And so, Leo, don't restrict yourself, and ask yourself how you'd like things to be and what you'd like to be doing. And even if it's fairly far-fetched, or appears fairly far-fetched, I really think that you can make it happen. And at the same time, you can be assertive today, but in a way that is not immediate. You have recently had Mars moving through Leo, and perhaps with Mars moving through Leo, you have felt that there were times when you really had to voice your opinion, where you had to take action, where you perhaps had to be confrontational. But with Mars moving back into Cancer, I think there's less room for confrontation, and perhaps you need to recognize that you can get your way and do things you want to do without having to confront anyone. And it may just be about not advertising what you're doing. If you want to be stopped, if you want people to tell you no, you can't do something, then the best way for that to happen is to give plenty of warning, to tell everyone what you're going to do. I suppose you can publish your plans, you can email everyone and tell them what you're planning on doing today, and then that's just inviting comment, and it's inviting criticism, and it's inviting restriction. So it may be a case now that the less said the better, and you just quietly get on with it. And in the process of doing that, there may be a sense that you are just letting go of something that has been holding you back, something perhaps from 2024 that you wanted to say goodbye to. It's gone, and therefore, Leo, you might have a great sense of your own freedom, and you might feel that finally you're free of something, and that could bring a sense of relief. Now, if you are an American Leo, then this afternoon the moon changes sign, and that change of sign from Aries into Taurus could have an impact. It could suddenly make you feel more focused, because the moon moves into Taurus, where it makes a square to Pluto, and suddenly you feel that there is just something you want to do, something you want to focus on, and you might feel that there are a couple of things holding you back. Moon square Pluto. I mean, Pluto may be a real or imagined block on your freedom, but I think in most cases it's an imagined block, and you're going to want to sort of move forward with perhaps an agenda, perhaps a plan, and that might be something you start to think about this afternoon if you're in the Americas. If you're in Europe, that might not happen until late this evening. You might have gone to bed by the time it really starts to kick in. If you're in Australia, well, that's something to look forward to tomorrow. But I'll be talking more about this movement from Aries into Taurus, Leo. I will be discussing it more tomorrow. Virgo, the main aspect today from your perspective is probably moon trine Mercury. So the moon is in Aries and it's trine Mercury in Sagittarius, and it's, I would have said, quite a pleasant aspect, and it is maybe about you being able to make sense of things. You are kind of focused on what needs to be done. I don't think it's a trivial aspect, even though Mercury in Sagittarius might sound a bit light. You have to remember that Mercury in Sagittarius is in quite a grounded sector of your chart. Mercury, with Mercury in Sagittarius, Mercury's been in Sagittarius for a long time now, and Mercury's finally getting ready to leave and move into Capricorn. But while Mercury is in Sagittarius, you're perhaps feeling that there are things relating to your home or your family that perhaps need to be resolved, need to be sorted out, and Moon trine Mercury perhaps gives you another chance to say something or to organize something or to maybe feel that you can explain what you've been working out. So maybe with Moon trine Mercury, you're reaching some decisions about your home and your family. That is a possibility. And now might be a time where you're bringing it all together. And whatever happens, Virgo, I think you're going to find it pretty easy to say what's on your mind, and just being able to do it in a sort of a light way where there's no real pressure, no obstacles, and you can just be completely open and honest about it. And at the same time, you're going to be able to talk about things in a very serious way, as if you absolutely know what you're talking about. And that's true. You're going to be able to present a vision which other people are going to take seriously. So if you've got something to say and you think it's important, then say it. And it may be a situation where you are right and someone else is wrong. And do believe in the possibility that you are right, that you actually got everything sorted out. And so now might actually be a good time to, I won't quite say lay down the law, but something like that. Because you seem to understand things better than other people. And you have a clear idea about the way things should proceed, and I think you can justify that as well. So if you really feel that you're right and other people are wrong, then consider the possibility that you really are right and that your conclusions need to be brought out into the open. And so don't apologize for your viewpoint, and don't be too sort of relativistic about it. I mean, I know it's easy to think in terms of your truth, my truth, and there's no such thing as a truth, that the truth is just relative. Well, I don't think the truth is relative, not for you today. I think your truth is the truth, and someone else's truth, if it contradicts your truth, may actually be the wrong truth. It could be fake. So Virgo, I think it's going to be very important that you really have faith in yourself. Now, if you're in the Americas, Virgo, then this afternoon the moon does change sign, and the moon changes sign from Aries into Taurus. And I would have said that sign change is quite welcome. And I think it perhaps reinforces what I've just been saying about the truth. I think with Moon in Taurus, you get a sense of what is real, and you start to be able to see things from a broader perspective, but a perspective which is also very grounded, and you actually get an understanding of the way things should be, and you get more confirmation that your vision is the right vision. And yes, this is a vision that I think needs to be expressed with conviction and power. Libra, there is a square aspect between the moon and Mars today, and I think that this Moon-Mars square is likely to have some impact on you. I mean, you've got the moon is in Aries. Moon is obviously in your opposite sign. It's square Mars, and this Mars aspect, this Moon-Mars aspect, possibly relates to other people and how you get on with them. And at first sight, this Moon-Mars aspect could be somewhat tense. I mean, Moon-Mars aspects, at least Moon-Mars squares, can be stressful, and it can be about a battle. and you feeling that you really have to express yourself and you have to tell someone what you believe is right. Or it could work the other way. It could be about someone else being very sure of themselves. I mean, Mars is in Cancer. Mars in Cancer doesn't really like to compromise. But the thing is, the Moon and the Mars are in mutual reception. And perhaps you need to see human contact as being dynamic. And it is through human contact that you move on. There's some kind of dialectical process here, I suppose. You have an idea, someone has an alternative idea. These ideas might sort of clash with each other, and then you find a third idea which kind of can synthesize these two ideas, and that's how you move on, how you develop. So perhaps you can sort of use this dialectical approach to develop as a person, and it might be a case where argument and discussion can be very useful. So I know, Libra, that you are the sign of, your Libra is a sign of the scales, that you like balance, that you don't want to rock the boat, but sometimes you do have to get involved in a little bit of a conflict, because without conflict, then is there any progress? Was it Karl Marx? Or was it Karl Marx who said war or violence is the midwife of history? I mean, I know that's a quite cruel thing to say. I mean, I'm not talking about violence really, but you need perhaps some kind of conflict to move on. And you shouldn't be. I mean, so my main point here is that you shouldn't be afraid of conflict, and you shouldn't be afraid of tension. I mean, tension might sound like a bad thing. If you're tense, you're feeling nervous, and you're not feeling happy. But it's through tension that you become aware of a need for change. You know what you want. You know what is holding you back, and so this tension can perhaps allow you to move forward, even though it might not seem like it at the time. So if you are feeling tense today, then in a way you should regard that as a positive, because it means that someone cares, it means you care, and it means that there is the possibility of change. Now, from a heliocentric perspective, we have two aspects involving Venus. Venus is your ruler. We have Venus trine Pluto, and we have the Earth semi-square Venus. So that Venus trine Pluto suggests to me, Libra, that you actually are able to get your way. You're able to come across in a powerful and dynamic way, and people are going to listen to you, and they may accept you, and perhaps accept that you have not just something to offer, but you're someone perhaps who, in certain cases, has something of the leader about them. So you can create change, and you shouldn't underestimate your social skills, and you certainly shouldn't underestimate your charisma. Now, also, the Earth is semi-square Venus, and again, we get the concept of tension here. Semi-square, 45-degree aspect, and so the Earth is your environment. Venus represents you. It's about you trying to fit in with your environment, feeling comfortable in your environment. Semi-square, there's tension there. And you may just start the day feeling that you're not at home, that the environment isn't fully supportive. But again, I think that's a good thing, because it spurs you to make the necessary changes, and perhaps it spurs you to force change onto other people. So actually, when you break down today, Libra, there is a lot happening, and it might seem like a difficult and a complicated day, but it's actually a day that if you make the most of everything you've got, that you can actually accomplish an enormous amount. Scorpio, it is a time when I think that you do actually have a certain amount of power at your disposal, and that is because there is a square aspect between the Moon and Mars. Now that might not sound great, Moon square Mars, but as I think I mentioned yesterday, the Moon and Mars are in mutual reception. So Mars which is your ruler, has gone back into Cancer, and I think that Mars in Cancer isn't such a bad thing. I think the fact that it's in a water sign gives you a certain sympathy with what Mars represents, and you also perhaps are motivated to try different things, not to be stuck in one place, and to just accept that there are really, many opportunities out there which you can take advantage of, and you should not be restricted to one place or indeed one set of ambitions. I mean, that might actually be how this Mars moving out of Leo into Cancer works. Perhaps recently you thought that you were set on your path. You knew which way you were going. It was clear with that Mars in Leo. But now you're seeing things in a different way, and there might be a sense of review. And perhaps you've reached a conclusion that maybe since November you've perhaps been limiting yourself, and you've assumed the world was perhaps simpler than it actually is, and now you're starting to see new opportunities, new possibilities, and you're just trying to integrate them into your life. And perhaps you want to return to your ambitions, deciding what you really want to do. You may not want to return to that until April, when April Mars moves into Leo again. And as far as the Moon Mars mutual reception is concerned, it is something that really does work in your favor, because Mars, your ruler, is strengthened by the Moon, and with Moon making a square to Mars, I think that aspect gives you a lot of power, and it gives you the ability to organize things and prepare in a way that is just right. You just know how things should be, and you are thinking still a little bit about power. And I know the Mars Pluto opposition is breaking up. I mean Pluto Mars is now it's nearly 2 degrees off the opposition, but it's still there. You can still feel it. And I think that in terms of your own power, by reorganizing things, changing your approach, perhaps focusing on a few details, but in a very dynamic, hands-on kind of way, you really can give yourself a boost. Now, in terms of the way you come across and the way you appear to other people, there is something about you that at the moment is maybe mysterious, or you may give the impression that you are hiding something, and that is because you've got true Black Moon Lilith is at 0 degrees 23 Scorpio, and so having true Black Moon Lilith right at the beginning of Scorpio, and the Moon is moving towards an opposition of true black moon Lilith. So with this true black moon Lilith, it's about how you appear. And remember, true black moon Lilith is also square Pluto, and I think it's perhaps that the moon is making this T-square, moon opposition true black moon Lilith, moon making a square to Pluto. So there's just something about the way you come across, particularly if you're in the Americas, that would be this afternoon and this evening. In Europe, it might not be quite so intense, and it might be more about late in the evening, maybe not at all, maybe it's something you have to consider tomorrow. But I think it is quite apparent, perhaps, that you are hiding something, that you have got something about your personality that you don't necessarily want to reveal, but people are picking up on it. They may find it intriguing, but I suppose it's also possible that they might also find it slightly off-putting, or it might scare them. But maybe you want to scare people. I mean, I don't mean really scare people, but if you want to make people uneasy with true black moon Lilith at the beginning of Scorpio, well, I think you can. And at the same time, I suppose if people are looking for a complicated life. I mean, some people want a complicated life. They want complications. They want to explore complications. You might be just a person to talk to, just a person to have around, because you're not afraid to go deeply into things, particularly now, with that true black moon Lilith. And so perhaps you have an intensity which can work in your favour. Now, heliocentrically, we also have Mars making an exact square to Chiron. And I think we should look at the heliocentric position of the planets. And Mars is your ruler. And if it's square Chiron, I think that there's a sense in which you want to do things your way. It's not a time where you want to compromise, where you want to just follow other people's lead. It's about you being an individual, and I think that is very important to you. And of course, you have to be aware that individuality often has a price. That maybe some people will not approve of you; they won't like what you're doing. But do you care? I suspect that you don't care that much. Or rather, you think it's more important to stand out as someone special rather than just fade into the background. And Scorpio, there may be a certain amount of necessity to stand out. It may be you have to stand out for a reason. It may be that there is an injustice out there, or as we're dealing with Chiron, there may be a wound that needs to be healed. And in order to heal that wound, you may have to make your intentions clear, and you may have to do something which upsets the balance, and that just can't be helped. Sagittarius, we have the situation where Mercury is very, very late in your sign. So Mercury is, New York time at noon, is at 28:58 Sagittarius. So this is the tail end of the Sagittarius season. I mean, I know that the sun is already in Capricorn. It's been in Capricorn actually for quite a long time. It's past the halfway, but Mercury is the last remnant, and Mercury is on the verge of changing sign. So as far as when Mercury changes sign, when Mercury moves into Capricorn, tomorrow for sure. So this is the last full day of Mercury being in Sagittarius, and it may be that there are certain things you want to finish off. Perhaps in some respects, with the Mercury in the last degree of Sagittarius, it's maybe the last elements of 2024. I mean, I know it's 2025, we're a week into 2025, but still there is a sense here that just something needs to be finished, something from the old year, and perhaps to an extent, yeah, it is still 2024. So what is it that you want to get done? What is it that you want to say? And Mercury is still making a square to Neptune. So yesterday we had Mercury square Neptune. That aspect is still there, and so somehow perhaps you have to sort of cut through the confusion, cut through everything that's been holding you back. Perhaps you put something on ice, or you delayed something, or there was something you wanted to say but you didn't say it. But now is your chance. Now is the time to say it, because it may be a case of speak now or forever hold your peace. So if you want to say something, maybe now is the time to do it. And especially today, with the moon making a trine to Mercury. That trine is very smooth. It's fairly effortless. So if there's something you want to say, you can say it. It might be important, but you're able to do it in a way that is light-hearted and is fun, but your message is still crystal clear. So Sagittarius, don't be complacent. I think that is really quite important, and do take yourself seriously, and you can enjoy yourself, but also have half an eye to the future, one eye on the future. And you have Moon square Mars. Moon square Mars, Moon is in Aries square Mars. And so Moon in Aries, to my mind, from a sort of Sagittarian perspective, is about you doing something that really is of value. Something you enjoy doing, but you also know it's important to you. And that Moon square Mars, remembering that Moon and Mars are in mutual reception with each other. They're in each other's signs. Moon in Aries, Mars in Cancer. There is a certain intensity to what you're doing, and I suppose, Sagittarius, if you're going to do something, don't do it half-heartedly. I mean, I suppose you can do it half-heartedly, but it won't be very satisfactory. It won't feel good. But if you give something everything you've got, then I don't think you'll be disappointed by the results. And if there is a need to push things through, to quicken the pace, if you feel that things are getting a bit slow, other people aren't being responsive enough, then you can increase that pace. You can make things move faster. In fact, you can make things move dramatically faster. And maybe that's something you'll have to do if you feel that time is running out. And I think there is a sense of hurry today. I don't want to encourage you to be in too much of a hurry. I mean, if you're in too much of a hurry, you'll make mistakes, you'll have accidents. We don't want that to happen. But you can't be too relaxed, too leisurely. And if you feel that, for example, other people aren't moving fast enough for you, I think there's something you can do to stir things up. Just a single action, a single word can, I think, make all the difference. Capricorn, today we have the moon making a square to Mars, and that moon square Mars, I mean, I do think it's a powerful aspect, but perhaps because of this aspect, you might feel that you don't necessarily have as much control as you would like to have. You'd like to be more in control. And, it's tempting to, try harder, to assert yourself, to raise your voice, to tell everyone that you really are here, that you really exist. But I don't think you should worry about it too much. I mean, there are times when you have to accept that there are things that other people want to do, and are they going to listen to you? I mean, they might, but I don't think they're going to listen to you too hard. And just don't be angry about it. With this moon square Mars, you know, I don't think anger would get you anywhere. And also consider the possibility, Capricorn, that maybe other people do know what they're doing. Maybe your family have ideas which they really want to, you know, move forward with, and let them get on with it, within reason, of course, and just see what happens. And don't underestimate people. I mean, you might feel that someone doesn't know what they're doing, that they're being stupid, that they haven't got the experience, but maybe you're just taking things too seriously, and don't feel that it's an issue of power. Although I do understand, Capricorn, that today I think power is an important issue. I think that you are going to want to be in control, and I think you can be in control. I don't think you'll have any problems asserting yourself if you feel you really must. But I think in most cases it's just something that you don't necessarily have to do, and I think that you can just let things run their course, and also, you know, don't assume that you yourself have got all the energy in the world. It may be that is a good reason why you should just let other people get on with it and not feel you have to interfere. Why should you have to interfere? And why should you have to worry about whether someone else knows what they're doing? Just perhaps just relax, be yourself, and I think things will be a lot easier that way. Now, this moon square Mars that I've been talking about, you know, moon is in Aries, square Mars in Cancer, but the moon may be changing sign. Certainly if you're in the Americas, the moon changes sign this afternoon. In Europe, very late this evening. So this is kind of more if you're in the Americas. If you're not in the Americas, then perhaps you need to think about that tomorrow. But if you are an American Capricorn, then this afternoon the moon changes sign from Aries into Taurus, and I would say that sign change is pretty welcome, because moon moves into Taurus, and the moon is moving into its exaltation. And with the moon moving into Taurus, you might find that people become more reasonable. People make you less nervous. I think for much of the day, or all of the day perhaps, if you're in Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, people were making you nervous. You weren't sure about their motives. They were kind of a bit... it's a bit disconcerting having to deal with them. But with the moon moving into Taurus, I do think that things become easier. So American Taurans, you just may feel a little more relaxed in the last half of the day, provided you avoid money and financial issues. If you are really concerned about money, well, it might be different, because the moon in Taurus does make a square to Pluto, and that moon square Pluto, it could be obsessive about things and money and material objects, who has what, who owes what to who, all that kind of stuff. So perhaps financial matters should be avoided if you're in the Americas late in the day, because they just may be more trouble than they're worth. Or you just may, I suppose, be reminded that something is important to you, of a material nature. Should it be important to you? I don't know. You'll have to work it out. Aquarius, it seems to be a day when you've got lots to say, lots of things on your mind, lots of things to talk about, and I think you'll come over as being a fairly easygoing person who is able to move from one thing to another with relative speed, and I think that you can certainly cover a lot of ground. Okay, you might not be able to cover this ground in a huge amount of detail, but it's perhaps about just getting a broad view, covering lots of different things. I mean, maybe you'll have to go over it again, because I don't think you're in the mood really for staying in one place for too long, or staying in with one idea for too long. You will want to move on. I mean, that's good. I think it gives you a certain amount of curiosity, and as you go about today's business, I think that you'll be able to inform yourself about lots of different things, and you're helped by an aspect between the moon and Mercury. So moon trine Mercury is about the mind, it's about conversation, it's about ideas, and things move quickly, and I think that in most cases people are going to enjoy your company, and you probably got something to say on most things. Perhaps you've got something to say on everything. Now, I'm saying this because the moon is in Aries, and so the moon in Aries, from an Aquarian perspective, it's a very communicative sign. It's quite spontaneous, and you don't have to think too much before saying something. Now, the moon does eventually move into Taurus, so this movement from Aries to Taurus really impacts those of you who are in America. Could affect you in Europe or West Africa incredibly late in the day, sort of coming up towards midnight. So it's mainly an American phenomena, this moon moving into Taurus. I mean, moon will move into Taurus for you outside the Americas tomorrow. It's not like you're going to miss out on moon moving into Taurus. But if you are in the Americas, then late this afternoon, moon moves into Taurus, and it does make a square to Pluto. So there could be a change. So for American Aquarians, if you feel the first day seems to be quite light and easy, there may be a seriousness during the last half of the day, and suddenly you'll realize that things do matter, that indeed focus matters, and with that, that is the fact that moon is moving into Taurus, and moon is making a square to Pluto, and Pluto is, of course, in your sign. So there might be a radical change, feeling that there are certain things that absolutely have to be taken seriously, and you might also feel that you need to hold firmly to your ground. You're not going to want to compromise or do things differently, or follow other people's advice. So with if you're an American Taurus, then an American Aquarius. If you're an American Aquarius, the first part of the day could be very different from the last half of the day, or at least from this afternoon onwards. And I mean, I suppose if you're interested in times, moon moves into Taurus 11 minutes past 5 in the afternoon, East Coast, 11 minutes past 2, West Coast, and I suppose even earlier if you're in Hawaii or Alaska. And aside from that, Aquarius, I think that you do have a lot of power, even while the moon is in Aries making a trine to Mercury. You do have power, and you are able to look after yourself. It's not as if you're being sloppy. It's not as if, or you're allowing other people to get the better of you. You're always aware of the power dynamic. It's just there, and so I don't think that's anything you necessarily need to worry about. And if you want something to change, you can make it change. If you feel that you need to impose your will on the situation, you can always do it. So, I mean, in that sense, you're quite protected, because you're able to protect yourself, and that's got to be good news. Pisces, for much of the day, the moon is moving through Aries. I mean, this afternoon, if you're in the Americas, the moon moves into Taurus. But with the moon moving through Aries, there could be a certain focus on financial matters. I mean, money is, I think, going to matter, and you should be ready to defend your financial interests. I mean, I'm not saying that anyone is going to be attacking these interests, but you must still be ready to defend yourself and to think constructively about money. I mean, it may not be a subject that you want to discuss, but I think it could be worth it. And with the moon making a mutual reception to Mars, this is moon in Aries making a mutual reception to Mars in Cancer. I think that suggests to me that you really can be assertive and you really can look after your own interests. So if you feel that you are hard done by financially, or something needs to be resolved, then I would suggest that you sort it out, because I think you can do a good job, and I think that you can make it very clear that your interests matter and that you're not someone who should be taken for granted, or it shouldn't be assumed that you won't complain. Now, the moon in Aries does also make a trine to Mercury, and that moon trine Mercury could be about money. It could also be about your direction in life, how you understand your ambitions. It could be about your career. And so that moon Mercury trine is about easy communication. The words just flow, your ideas just flow, and indeed your demands just flow. So if there's something you want and you feel you need to be taken seriously, then just say what's on your mind. If you want to talk to someone, tell someone what you want, I think the person you're talking to, even if they are an authority figure, you feel that in some way they're sort of elevated, they have more power than you, even in that situation, I think they are prepared to listen. So I think, Pisces, it's going to be very important that you don't underestimate yourself, and that you do make a sort of a constant effort to look after your own interests. Again, I'm not saying that you're under threat. It's more about making the most of what you have. And I think if you make the most of what you have, you can benefit, whether it's in terms of money, your ambitions, your career, your business. So in that sense, I think quite a useful day. Now, the moon does change sign. If you're in the Americas, certainly. This afternoon, the moon moves from Aries to Taurus in the Americas. And that sign change does create a change of emphasis. I think it's going to be perhaps less emphasis during the last half of the day on financial matters. I think it's perhaps more about perhaps ideas and how you bring your ideas together, and not being too rigid about your ideas, not assuming that you have sorted everything out, and maybe you feel that something needs to be confirmed, and it's possible that late in the day, if you are in the Americas, you feel that almost for your own peace of mind, you have to go somewhere, not very far. It may just be somewhere you can, I don't know, it could, for one reason or another, it could be 50 yards on foot, 50 meters on foot, just some short visit, and it might make the difference. And it would perhaps be a time for resolving things with your neighbours. I suppose in the Pisces chart, the sign Taurus does have a connection with neighbours, so that might be something that American Pisceans can consider. But if you're not in the Americas, then you can consider that consider that tomorrow, because by tomorrow the moon will be in Taurus for everyone, wherever you are. And that's it. I think my readings were perhaps a little briefer in parts, but really not a great deal going on astrologically in terms of, at least in terms of geocentric aspects. So now it's time to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 55, which is abundance. It represents the peak of civilization. I mean, that's a bit dramatic for just a one-day reading, but it just seems that things are coming together, but maybe it's also a situation where it's as good as it gets. So that is that possibility, and it's kind of, the words that the I Ching says, the Wilhelm translation, it uses the words, be not sad like the midday sun. So be not sad like the midday sun is about the midday. It's noon. It's the sun is at its peak. It's not getting any better. From now on, the sun is declining. It's moving towards the western horizon. So it might just be, enjoy it while it lasts. Enjoy it while you can, and that might relate to the moon changing sign. The moon is moving through sort of late Aries, making a trine to Mercury. I mean, the moon is in mutual reception to Mars, and then it changes into Taurus, and so Taurus perhaps represents something new, but saying goodbye to the old, and that may be the abundance moon in Aries. And that sign change, it's this afternoon if you're in the Americas. It's very late this evening in Europe. It's tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand or Asia. So that might be how it works. But there is a moving line here, and the second line from the bottom moves, and what it says is that you can see the stars at noon. There is this concept of the noon, and yet you can see the stars. I think one translation seems to be suggesting that you can actually see the Great Bear, as is Ursa Major. You can see Ursus Major. Is that right? You can see the Great Bear, and that's. Of course, is suggestive of an eclipse. Of course, there's not an eclipse today. There's not a new moon. There's not a new moon today, obviously. So we have to kind of see that in a sort of a symbolic sense. And when there is an eclipse, it means that perhaps we can't be seen, and that might be an issue. We want to be seen. We know we've got so much to offer, but today there's a sense of darkness, and so our abilities, our talents, everything we've got to offer, we just may feel that we have to hold back on it because no one is noticing it. We're not getting the appreciation we deserve, and yet we feel this abundance. We feel that something is really happening, that we've just got so much to offer. It's all making sense, but is anyone going to listen? Is anyone going to even notice us? So, I mean, don't worry about it too much. I mean, this is a moving line, and it is just a reading for today. And so that might be how it feels. And we just shouldn't be too upset about it, even if we get annoyed that people who don't deserve any attention are getting attention. And I suppose, what inferior elements. In the I Ching likes to talk about inferior elements, people that shouldn't be getting so much attention. But that's a shame. But it's the way it is. Now we do have a moving line, and because we have a moving line, we move to a different hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram 34, which is the power of the great. And this is a hexagram which is about our power and how we assert our power and how we get noticed. And we can get noticed because our power is mounting, it's getting stronger and stronger. So a very different hexagram from the previous one. So the previous one, abundance. Okay, the abundance wasn't a problem. The moving line was the problem. But we might have, particularly at the beginning of the day, felt that we just were not being recognized because it was dark, even if it wasn't dark. But now, with the power of the great, we can feel ourselves getting our strength back. But we shouldn't go crazy about it because that power may be somewhat blind, somewhat like a wild animal, I suppose, and it needs to get its timing right. And so towards the end of the day, as you feel yourself getting stronger, you might feel that you're ready to do something, you're ready to take action, but don't just take action in some kind of random, uncontrolled way. You do have to get your timing right. But if you do get your timing right and you are able to exercise some self-discipline, I think that you will be very pleased with the results. And I now want to very quickly look at Justin Trudeau before I look at Mars in Cancer. So I don't know, when I recorded this video, when I looked at the news, because I'm recording this on Monday morning Pacific time. So when I last looked, he was still Prime Minister. He hadn't resigned. So I'm assuming he is still Prime Minister. And if he does resign, I'll look at his chart in more detail. But there's just one thing I wanted to point out about Justin Trudeau, and it relates to his solar return. So here is, here's Justin Trudeau's chart. See, he's born on Christmas Day, 1971. I'm not going to consider his transits at the moment. Just Christmas Day, 1971, and he was born in Ottawa. Just a reminder, I suppose, that he's such an establishment figure. Of course, he would be born in Ottawa, Canada's capital, born amongst government buildings and the government. So I suppose to the manor born. But as far as his solar return is concerned, here is his solar return, and this is his solar return. Now, what I find very interesting about his solar return is that he has got 29 Cancer rising, and this is something I didn't notice when I was looking at his chart sort of last year, at the end, I don't know, a few weeks ago, last time I looked at his chart. So he's got Cancer rising, 29 Cancer rising, obviously 29 Capricorn on descendant. So what this means is, in his solar return, the Mars is now transiting. Mars has just crossed his ascendant, and you can see this in terms of if you look at his solar return on the inner wheel, and you look at Tuesday's planets on the outer wheel, you can see that in terms of his solar return, Mars is just crossed his ascendant, and also Saturn is at 1504 Pisces. So Saturn has just made a sesquiquadrate to his ascendant. Remember, it's his solar return ascendant, not his own ascendant. So this Mars-Saturn sesquiquadrate is hitting his solar return angles, and so that might be what is forcing his resignation. We don't know whether he's resigned yet. At least I don't know. And so that's perhaps the message. If we want to take any practical message from that, that is maybe we should be looking at transits to solar returns. And a solar return may be a sort of a valid chart for a year. And yeah, we should perhaps consider its transits. And what I really want to talk about in this video, aside from Justin Trudeau, is Mars in Cancer. I mean, I should have kind of talked about Mars in Cancer yesterday, but I wanted to talk about Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. But Mars in Cancer, it's a difficult one, Mars in Cancer, because Mars is in its fall. And so we might get the idea with Mars in Cancer of someone who isn't necessarily able to assert themselves in a smooth, easy, relaxing kind of way. Now, that doesn't mean to say that Mars in Cancer people can't assert themselves. They certainly can. But they might just be too focused on the emotional side of things, but not in a comfortable way, just taking things too emotionally and taking things to heart. And I suppose also Cancer can say something about what you regard as worth throwing your power into. So if you've got Mars in Cancer, Cancer says something about where your energy goes. I mean, Cancer, you have to ask, what does Cancer mean? Cancer can mean many different things. Cancer can mean your country. It's a very patriotic, nationalistic sign, Cancer. Cancer can also mean your imagination. It can mean your family, or it can mean your prejudices, and you can just completely focus on your prejudiced view of the world and find it really difficult to change. And what is the basis of prejudice? Well, I suppose the basis of prejudice is the past. Very often it's what you believe is important from the past, and you're not going to let go of the past, and you're going to hold on to it very firmly. So those are a few ideas about Mars in Cancer. It can also be very vindictive, potentially. It can really want to get people. It can be. I mean, like, for example, if we start to look at some famous people with Mars in Cancer, first one that shows up is Al Capone. I don't know Al Capone's time of birth. It's coming up for Al Capone's birthday, isn't it? He's born in 1899. But Al Capone had Mars at 2914 Cancer. So it's around the time of his Mars return. So Mars in Cancer might be someone who really goes over the top to defend his own interests. Any threat to his own interests, he will act, especially as he's got Sun opposition Mars, so his Mars in Cancer opposition Sun in Capricorn. That can make him extremely defensive, and any threat to his empire, to his property, to his stuff, to his power, he will react, in his case, with extreme violence. For example, the St. Valentine's Day massacre, which I think he was almost certainly responsible for. Now, Mars in Cancer can also be about the imagination, and it doesn't have to be anything boring. It can be, in fact, incredibly expansive and interesting. And one of America's best writers, Bill Burroughs, has Mars in Cancer. So there is Bill Burroughs' chart. I'm not going to make too much of an effort to try to work out how that fits in, but it's true, Bill Burroughs has Mars in Cancer. So you can be an important writer whose writing is kind of very original, and I think very American. There's something very American about Bill Burroughs. But he has Mars in Cancer. Mars in Cancer square true Black Moon Lilith. Exactly square true Black Moon Lilith. I think that certainly says something about Bill Burroughs. So perhaps in terms of what Bill Burroughs has put his energy into, okay, Cancer could be his imagination, because Cancer is a very imaginative sign, but it's also square true black moon Lilith, putting a lot of energy into the dark side of life for him. You know, whether that's drugs and violence and crime and the dark streets of New York, as he talked about in what was his novel, Junkie. Yeah, I did actually get to read Junkie, but that darkness that he's describing and the drugs in Junkie and I suppose what's the other book I read, Naked Lunch. I mean, there's a darkness there, but he's perhaps not just getting into his own darkness, but he's getting into society's darkness with that Mars square true black moon Lilith, and putting a lot of his energy into it. Perhaps his energy at every level, and living a very intense life, and somehow also living to a fairly grand old age. So Mars in Cancer can also, it can be defensive, it can be petulant. And the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has Mars in Cancer. I don't have a time of birth for Keir Starmer, but there is his Mars in Cancer. Interestingly, like Bill Burrows, he has Mars square true black moon Lilith. He's also got Mercury square Mars. So his Mars in Cancer, if you look at his posture, it's somewhat stiff in a way. He doesn't seem to be very relaxed, and he is very defensive, and he is petulant when he's under criticism. And I suppose you could also link that with the fact that he's got Sun conjunct Pluto, but he's really holding on to something, and perhaps his ideas, his ideology, and Mercury is square Mars, and I suppose Mercury square Mars, well, he was a successful lawyer. I mean, at least he was successful in terms of being Queen's Counsel, King's Counsel now, I suppose, being Director of Public Prosecutions, Mercury square Mars, Mars in Cancer, but now he's Prime Minister. I think that Mars in Cancer and its petulance and its defensiveness really is starting to show. Now, if you have Mars in Cancer, you can also have a great vision, and which can be, I suppose, tinged with an obsession with the nation. And film director Leni Riefenstahl had Mars conjunct Cancer, so there's her Mars in Cancer, exactly opposition Saturn. So Leni Riefenstahl was a film director who she made some brilliant films, but very controversial films. I mean, her films are regarded as being brilliant, even though the subject matter was not considered to be very tasteful or appropriate. Her films, which she did, sort of Triumph of the Will, which and Olympia, is that what it's called, about the Berlin Olympics? So she was essentially a Nazi propagandist, and she made these two films, which are considered to be major sort of works of art, best films, that some of the best films ever made, according to some experts. So she has Mars in Cancer opposition Saturn. So you could say that with her Mars in Cancer, she was putting a lot of energy into her nation, into Nazi Germany, and to supporting her nation. And Mars opposition Saturn, doing it in a rather sort of intense, grinding kind of way. I think she lived to she was over 100 when she died, and I think after the war, I mean, obviously she had a few problems given her Nazi past, but I think she made documentary films. I think she spent a lot of time in Africa. I think she was into scuba diving, I think. And that would perhaps show Mars in Cancer. Mars in Cancer, what do you put your energy into? Mars is a water sign. So perhaps putting your energy into scuba diving or nature documentaries is what she did, I suppose might make sense. But you can't see that Mars in Cancer without looking at the fact that she also has Mars opposition Saturn. It's a very difficult opposition that she has, which she put that into film. Now, in terms of the nation and sort of messed up ideas about the nation, and also vindictiveness, a kind of self-defeating vindictiveness, is Liz Cheney. So here's Liz Cheney, daughter of Dick Cheney, who fell out with Trump, and fell out with Trump in a big way, to the extent by which she supported the Democrats and appeared with Kamala Harris. I think the general view is that she probably lost the Kamala Harris votes because the Cheney name is so toxic. But yeah, she has Mars in Cancer, and I suppose once Mars in Cancer gets offended and gets annoyed with Trump, hell hath no fury. So she did everything she could to undermine Trump with her Mars in Cancer. And Mars in Cancer, quite close to America's sun. Remember, the United States has its sun at 13 Cancer. So very close to America's sun. And so you can perhaps see some of her vindictiveness there, and having fallen out with Trump, she's going to do everything she can to undermine him. But of course, in her case, it backfired. Now, Mars in Cancer can be nationalistic, and I suppose, I don't know, Liz Cheney, I suppose she felt she was looking after her country, doing the right thing. I suppose Mars hitting America's sun. But anyway, she's gone. At least we're not going to hear much of her for the moment. I suppose she can always return in one shape or form. Now, someone who had Mars in Cancer was a historic figure is Robert the Bruce. So Robert the Bruce is a Scottish hero who defeated the English at the Battle of Bannockburn. And Scotland, the key thing here is that Scotland is a Cancerian country. Traditionally, it's a Cancerian country. And so Robert the Bruce has Mars in Cancer. So Mars in Cancer, we can see this in two ways. So Mars in Cancer represents someone who is patriotic, I don't know whether patriotism had really any meaning in the 13th, 14th centuries. I mean, you could say that nationalism as a concept didn't really become real until the French Revolution, but you could see some sense of nationalism and patriotism here. And his Mars in Cancer, fighting for his country, and of course fighting for Scotland, because Scotland is a Cancerian country. And I don't want to go on for too long, but Cancer, when it goes wrong, Mars in Cancer, when it goes wrong, there can be a connection with drugs and drug abuse. And Sid Vicious, of the Sex Pistols fame, he had Mars in Cancer, and he was a heroin addict. I think that his mother was not very helpful in terms of his addiction. So he got, I think his mother might have taken heroin, might have been a heroin user as well, and this contributed to his death. And he has his Mars in Cancer trine Neptune, and so, okay, Mars trine Neptune, it's all very easy, isn't it? And Mars trine Neptune, he dies of a heroin overdose, I think, in New York. So that can be how Mars in Cancer works, because Mars in Cancer is just an emotional sign. Cancer is an emotional sign. Mars, okay, he might have found some constructive way to use his Mars through the music, through the Sex Pistols, but Mars in Cancer, there can be a drug issue there in certain cases. We shouldn't forget, of course, Bill Burroughs had Mars in Cancer, and he took a load of drugs, although he managed to survive. But Sid Vicious wasn't so lucky. Also, if you're British or Australian, you've probably heard of Paula Yates. She was, of course, married to Michael Hutchins, who was Australian, and he I think he hanged himself or strangled himself. I don't quite know how Michael Hutchins died, but it was complicated how he died. But Paula Hutchins, she died of a heroin overdose. Paula Yates died of a heroin overdose, and so Mars in Cancer may say something about that. May say something about her own insecurities. She, I think, spent a lot of her time thinking her father was one person, and then actually finding her father was someone else. A man called Huey Green, who was very famous in the 60s and 70s in the UK. And so an issue about where are her roots, what are her roots, and so she, maybe heroin had some part of it, although the way she died with heroin, it may just be she hadn't taken heroin for a long time, and then she took heroin again, and she wasn't aware of the concentration it was at, and that may be what killed her. But so that is one way in which Mars in Cancer can work. Finally, I suppose I should look at the is he being impeached for South Korean president? Yoon Suk Yeol has Mars in Cancer, and if we have his time of birth, he has Mars in Cancer conjunct the true black moon Lilith, and of course Yoon Suk Yeol, he president of Ukraine, South Korea. He declared martial law, and he had these sort of ideas about North Korea trying to take over South Korea. I mean, Mars in Cancer, apparently he was very conservative, very into his country, but kind of into his country in a kind of crazy kind of way, and encouraging him to do this thing. I mean, I'm sure he felt he was doing the right thing, but I suppose he was also looking after his own interests, and his wife was kind of pushing him in this direction. But here, that might be an example with Mars in Cancer conjunct true black moon Lilith of Mars in Cancer perhaps not working very well. Anyway, those are a few thoughts on Mars in Cancer. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would of course be super grateful if you were to subscribe, and if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.